Hey there, welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. Yep, Greatness Within podcast. I'm TJ Hoisington, and I have a new success interview that I want to share with you. In today's success interview, I was privileged to interview Olympian Kevin Rempel. I mean, here's a story of bouncing back from failure and tragedy and setting goals like going to the Olympics. I mean, here he was, he had a motocross accident. I'll let him really tell the story, but a motocross accident that left him paralyzed. But he made the decision that he wanted to make Team Canada and go to the Olympics. And that's exactly what he did. So you're not going to want to miss this interview. It was powerful. We talk about resiliency. We talk about finding your purpose and passion, oftentimes through pain. We talk about setting big goals for yourself and never giving up. And I tell you what, it's a rich interview. Now, before we jump into the interview, let me just remind you, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, I invite you to subscribe and make sure that you hit the notification button so that you are the first person to be notified when we come out with a new success interview like this or another training that I might put out there. Also, if you haven't subscribed to my podcast on iTunes, I invite you to go there. It's pretty easy to do. Just type in my name, TJ Hoisington, or the title of the show, which is Unleash Your Greatness Within. My podcast is one of the top podcasts in the self-help category. In fact, we've hit number 1, number 2, number 3 in the world several times. And so I'm excited to share ideas that help you achieve your goals and your dreams. So make sure that you subscribe. All right, so without any further ado, let's jump right into the interview. Kevin, welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast.
Right on. Thanks for having me on, TJ.
No, this is cool. I'm glad to have you. I'm glad your team reached out to me. I think your story has a lot of meaning, and I want to dive into that. And I know that you have a lot to share on that story because, wow, some windy roads there and so forth. But one of the things that I like to do when we start is get a little bit of your story, your background, and then that can lead kind of into your story, and then we'll sort of go from there.
All right, cool. So for nowadays, for most people that know me, they know me as a retired Paralympic athlete in sledge hockey. And for those people who don't know sledge hockey, it's where you play hockey sitting down for people with disabilities. And if you see me rolling around, you're just going to see me walking. And the first question is, well, if you're walking, why are you playing a Paralympic sport? And 12 years ago, this past July, is when I broke my back riding freestyle motocross. My dream was, as a teenager, going to the X Games, competing in freestyle. But after starting a company at the age of 20 years old, 6 months later, I had performed my first jump show on Canada Day weekend. And 2 weeks later, I crashed, broke my back, pelvis, ribs, and was instantly paralyzed. And doctors said I was likely never going to walk again. So that was the first piece. The second piece is that the kicker to my story is that my dad was also paralyzed 4 years before I was. So I got injured when I was 23, and when I was 19 years old, I was out deer hunting with my dad. We were building a tree stand when one of the branches that he was standing on broke. I was with him at the time, so the branch snaps. My dad falls 2 stories to the ground. I see him hit the ground, and he's gasping for air. Long story short, helped carry him out on the stretcher myself to the hospital. Doctors say my dad is a complete paraplegic as well. So in 4 years, my mom had both husband and son in wheelchairs, both with spinal cord injuries in the same house at the same time. My dad had a terrible time dealing with his injury, became very depressed, which led to also picking up a gambling addiction, which then led to my mom leaving my dad. And 7 weeks after my mom left my dad, he ended up taking his own life. So it was just in just under 5 years, I went from like everyday normal kid to dad being hurt, to pursuing my bike dream, to me being hurt. And then I was fortunate I learned how to walk again. I didn't because I didn't sever my spinal cord, it was like 6 weeks until I wiggled my first toe, and then another week till another few toes. And eventually, like a year to the day, I was riding again. And it took me 3 or 4 years to learn how to walk again. But even getting back up on my feet, like after my dad took his life, I felt like doing the exact same thing about a year later. And I definitely hit rock bottom. You know, I today now kind of refer to those, just not just in those significant moments, but other moments of our lives as hero moments, like where you need to be the hero of your own movie and decide what you're going to do and respond to in those situations. And so what I said to myself is that I don't want my story to be like my dad's. I don't want this to be the last chapter of my story. And so I picked myself back up, and this is long story short, because of course, getting out of depression is like extremely difficult and takes a long time, or can take a long time. But I discovered sledge hockey. At that time, I was looking for an extracurricular sport to be a part of. And when I was at wheelchair basketball, this other kid was in a wheelchair named Kevin rolls up beside me, and he goes, "Hey man, have you ever tried sledge hockey?" And I said, "No, what's that?" And he goes, "Oh, it's real sick. You get to hit people with disabilities." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?"
That's good.
I'm like, "That sounds so wrong."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Where do you sign up?" And but I had no idea that sport even existed. And so discovered Team Canada, spent 2 years, made the Paralympic team after Vancouver in 2010, and played for 5 world championships, bronze medal, retired. I'm going to skip forward because it's just, I don't know how much detail we want to go into, but like post-Olympic depression as well, and had to pick myself back up, relationship goes, finances go. And at that time, I then wanted to get my book out of the way. It was one of the first things. So I self-published my autobiography, but more than that, and where I'm at today is I had dreamt about creating a team building experience around sledge hockey. And that's my full-time job today is I run the sledge hockey experience, which is entirely focused on bringing the able-bodied people onto the ice to play sledge and experience not only a Paralympic sport, but to gain that perspective of what life is like living with a disability.
Wow.
And for them to help uncover their own unconscious biases towards people with disabilities, and to see and discover the strength and resilience that each of us have within us. And it sometimes just takes getting to an uncomfortable point till we are forced to decide what our life is going to be, and then we find that greatness, like your podcast here, then we discover that greatness within.
No, it's true, right? We have a similar message, and that's what's great. So I've got all kinds of random questions, man. I mean, your story,
fire away,
your story is just what? Okay, so let me take you a little bit back in my history a little bit. For years, I've been telling the story about W. Mitchell, who was a guy that was riding.
I love him.
Okay,
Dude,
you know W. Mitchell.
His book, when I was in rehab, I read his book. It was one of the first books I ever read. Changed my life.
Okay, so that's awesome, because for 18 years now, I've been telling his story about how his body was burnt, and then he severed his lower vertebrae or whatever it was.
Dude, it's the gnarliest.
But what he said was most powerful, and I want to know how this relates to your thinking. Because what I sense in you, just in your story, is that you are a person of sheer resilience. And so this is what W. Mitchell basically said. I may not get it exactly right, but he said, before I had this injury, I could do 10,000 things. Now I can only do 9,999 things, but I would rather dwell on the 9,000.
Rather than focus on the 9,000 I can't do, I want to focus on the 1,000 that I can do.
Exactly. I mean, so how does that relate to your mindset going through these trauma experiences?
So similar to his book title is, shoot,
I don't recall right now either. It's okay. Yeah. W. Mitchell, if someone Googles W. Mitchell, they'll see. Yeah.
So it's very similar to his book title. It's not what happens to you, it's what you do about it.
Yeah.
Is his book title.
Okay.
And one of the biggest lessons that I learned from my life experience and from my dad being injured is that you may not be responsible for what happened to you, but you're always responsible for what you do about it. And the lesson is that you need to take responsibility for your life.
Yes.
Meaning, what I saw in my dad is what drove me to not be like.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is that when my dad fell from the tree, he became very negative and pessimistic, and he would say the same 3 things, which were the branch shouldn't have broke, it's not my fault, and life's not fair. And that the truth is life is not fair.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of whether you are responsible for what may have happened, like take, driving recklessly and get into a car accident and you're in a bad situation, or you're diagnosed with cancer and it's genetics and you have no control over that. Whatever that situation is that you may not be responsible for what happened to you, but responsible for what you do about it. And so when I got injured, I self-inflicted that injury. Like, I crashed my motorcycle. I was responsible for jumping that day, despite the ramps being crooked, the wind blowing, the crowd forming, and me being nervous. I didn't have the courage to speak up and say I wasn't comfortable in the situation. And so when I crashed, I'm laying on the ground, and I always get asked what was going through your mind. I'm laying on the ground. I'm in excruciating pain. My back is broken. It's like a hot knife is twisted into my spine. Any breathing is like just twisting that knife.
Yeah.
But in that moment, my friend Chris was there filming. He caught the crash on film. And so he catches the crash on film. He turns the camera off, and he runs up behind like the line of the crowd, and he gets over to where the paramedics are, and he leans down over top of me, and he puts his hand out, and he looks at me, and his nickname was Mudman. And he looks at me, and he looks down, he's like, Remps, I got you, man. And he like gives me his hand. And like in that moment, like I grab Mudman's hand, I look at Chris, and I swear on my life, and he'll testify to this, the first words that came out of my mouth at that time, right. I looked up at Chris and I said, you better be filming this.
Oh, you did?
And I told him to turn the camera back on. And he's like, okay, cool. Yeah. There was no, I love you. There's no, it's going to be okay. It's just like, turn the fucking camera back on.
Right.
Because in my head, what I saw was I wanted to be the comeback story. I was already thinking about that because the people I looked up to, many of the people I looked up to were like the other riders who would break both their legs and come back and win a gold medal, who would overcome a knee injury, 3 knee surgeries, right. And then succeed again. And so like, this was just another chapter of the story. So when I told Chris to hit record, the mindset you have while you're living your story is the greater the challenge, the greater the story.
Yeah, right.
And that you need to continue playing the role of the character, which is you, and choose not to give up when those challenging circumstances come your way.
I think the way you articulated that is really smooth, is really good. That's well said. Because you're right. When you read any biography or you read any story from failure to success, right? Any success story has a ton of failures, and it's about that mindset. And you obviously, to think that you're in this situation, you're laying on the ground, and you say you better be filming, to instinctively be thinking, hey, this is a hiccup, but I'm going to make this part of my story, kind of a thought process.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. But, it also is amazing to me. People are confronted with traumatic experiences all their lives. You said life is not fair. And I've shared this on one other podcast before, and I'll share it here. When I was a young boy, when people would say life is not fair, right? I would tell people as a teenager, I'm one day going to be a motivational speaker and I'm going to do this. And then these adults around me would say, yeah, but when reality hits and you have to pay a mortgage and you have to do these things, that's just probably not going to happen. And in my mind and in my heart, I go, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to design my life about it. And they would say, well, life isn't fair. And so I had this negative reaction to that phrase, life isn't fair, until I was 32 years old, and I came from a strong family, good, positive family, and suddenly my dad left my mom. And at 32, now I had a family, and I had 3 children, I believe, at the time, and I had something to turn to, but I remember how much that broke my heart. And for the first time at 32 years old, I realized what you're saying right now. It took me a while, that sometimes life is not fair. And so what I'm hearing you say, and add in here wherever you think needs to be added, but what I'm hearing you say is, you cannot determine your circumstances, but you can always choose your response to those circumstances, right? You don't want to react to your circumstances, but you do want to respond and have faith in the future.
Absolutely. I have, I don't know if polarizing beliefs is the word, in the sense that I believe that life is not fair, but also life is fair. Like in business now, like I believe so much in meritocracy, like the best man or woman wins. Like if you fail at business, it's probably because you're not good enough. Like you need to do something differently to succeed. And so I love that, yes, life is fair in that sense, but when life doesn't feel fair, you have to decide exactly what you said, like how you're going to respond to the situation, not react. And if you react in the sense that like my life is over and I don't know what to do about this, and unless someone's going to just come here and rescue me, will anything ever get better?
Yeah.
Versus looking at it and saying, what can I do today to choose to respond to the situation, and asking yourself the question, like, what do I have control over?
Yeah.
You know, it's so easy when you feel like a victim, like my dad, you feel like everything's out of your control. And my dad was a paraplegic, not a quadriplegic. So he had full use of arms, but he behaved as though he needed to be completely looked after. Like when we wanted to get him a vehicle with hand controls, he would say, well, if I need to go anywhere, mom can drive me around. Or when we talked about going out hunting again, he would say, well, if I can't do it like I used to, I don't want to do it at all. And it's like, you still have control over these things. You still have your mind. Like you didn't have a brain injury when you fell from the tree. You just have a back injury. You're physically hurt. You're not mentally injured there. And so every single day you have the ability to choose what you do with your time, where you focus your energy and attention. And so when I was in those like fearful, like horrible situations, I'll give you another example of like, I hit rock bottom, suicide 3 times. And the first time was the year after my dad. I had a knife in my chest. I never injured myself, but like I said, what I said to myself in that moment was that I don't want this to be the ending to my story, and I don't want to go out the way like my dad. The second time was after the Paralympics in Sochi, and I was in the emergency psychiatric ward at St. Joseph's Hospital in Hamilton with my mom and my grandma. We just spent 2 hours in the waiting room, and finally got into like the next stage, waiting for the emergency psych doc. And I get in this other room, and there's like a young boy who's like 18 or so years old. He's sitting there with his parents. He's got like fresh cuts, razor blade cuts on both of his forearms. Like they're bleeding at the time. They're so fresh. So he goes in the one room with his doctor, and I go in the other room, and we're both in there for like less than like a minute or two. And both of us have doctors come in. In a couple minutes, like I could hear the conversation through the wall, and he starts freaking out, and he's like, fuck you. He's like, you told me you weren't going to make me talk about this. And he like kicks open the door, and he gets out in the hallway, and he punches the hand sanitizer off the wall, and they call security. And like that gets calmed down, but like our door opens up, and I stand up. I'm thinking I'm gonna have to like fight this guy because my mom and my grandma are here. I don't know what the fuck's gonna happen. And so that all settles down, but it was like literally like in that moment exactly is like for me mentally, when I like snapped out of my depression and realized I need to get better because I need to help people like him. But here's what's really important is what did I do the next day? And so people are like, okay, well, like, cool, Kev, like, now what? And when I look at what put me into a downward spiral after the Paralympics, for example, is that I stopped doing the things that worked. I stopped eating right. I started going out more often. I would party. I would stay up late. I was drinking. I wasn't exercising. I had no new goals. I was financially spending my money, and I wasn't doing anything to make any money. And so I looked at that night, like I'm started thinking to myself, I'm like, these are all the things that I did to send me in this downward spiral. And so if I'm at rock bottom here and I know I need to make a change, what can I do to spiral up? And so I looked at, if you look at the handful of all those different things that I did, you can do any one of those in any order. But the first thing I did was, I swear, my mom spent the night, my grandmother went home, but I was so scared to spend the night alone. My mom spent the night. And the next day I asked her to go take me to the grocery store. And I bought groceries. I bought healthy food because I figured if I didn't have the motivation to get to the gym and work out, that I at least need to fuel my body to help fuel my mind. If I could start feeling better about myself through nutrition, I could start thinking more clearly. And then it became things like scheduling a walk. Even if I couldn't go far, I just wanted to get out of the house 5 minutes a day, to get outside and get some fresh air, to call my friend and say, hey, I just need to like hang out for a little bit. Can you just like spend some time together? And I would break down crying with my friend, but like just getting around people, because when you become very depressed, you feel very alone, and then you isolate yourself, and then you don't get out.
No, you know, and I'm noticing a pattern. Tell me, you saw your reaction of your dad with his injury. You said, I don't want to be like that. You then end up in this hospital. I don't want to be like that. and you see these, I'm seeing a pattern that you're a learner, right? You look around and you go, I want to be successful, and I'm not going to be successful if I have that attitude, or if I behave like that, or if I make choices like that. And you've used, it seems like, other people's, let's just say, dysfunctions or whatever, or challenges, in a positive way for yourself. Fair to say?
Absolutely.
And I
I look
think,
at,
okay, go ahead.
yeah, no, I look at, one of my biggest motivations is, even if I may not know what I want, I know what I don't want.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. Right. Exactly. And that's a good place to be, to clearly know what you don't want. I mean, many people aren't living their dreams because they haven't made up their mind on what they don't want, really. I mean, they got to decide where you want to go, get clear about that goal, and then manage and design a life that will make that goal a reality. But that means you're going to have to let go of some things. That means you're going to have to say no to some things. And then they may just be addictive behaviors, or they may just be a thought process or a pattern of thinking. You have to say enough already. And the moment people hit their day of, what I call a day of threshold, right, they'll change. But many people sometimes don't allow themselves to get to that day of threshold. Right.
Well, so like you said, so speaking about knowing what you want versus don't want, and you have that vision, but you want to figure out along the way, like you have to navigate that.
Sure.
So if you, at least if you have a vision, that's what's going to pull you through, let's say, the gauntlet here.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't know what you want, you have to keep trying things to see what doesn't work and what you don't want. And that is what will help you find out what does work and what you do want. I think a lot of people are afraid to fail, afraid to start, don't know where to start, but you just have to try something, start somewhere. And as soon as you at least try that one thing, you will then have an experience and some feedback about what to do next.
Sound advice. Absolutely. Right on. So you brought up somewhere, I was watching a video, there was someone said something about determination. So I have a couple thoughts here, and you can unweave them. I think I'm not a big fan of willpower in the general sense that people think about it. I believe in vision. I believe in purpose. When you have vision and purpose, you don't have to will yourself to something, right? You gravitate toward it. Yes, that doesn't mean you don't work hard. I'm not suggesting you don't work hard and you don't discipline yourself and you don't pay the price, if you will. Yeah. But it's almost free flowing, right? It's easy when you have the vision and the purpose. So what gave you the vision and the purpose when you're in that originally in the, you just realized you're paraplegic? And I think I saw in one of the videos that the doctor said you'll likely never walk again. Is that accurate so far?
Yep.
Okay. So what gave you, so I'm imagining two different people, you and let's say someone else. The doctor says you're never going to walk.
I think I know the answer already.
Go.
My answer, and I've never had this until you just asked the question now, but I think building even on what we just said is that my pain created my purpose. Like I said, being driven by what I didn't like, or who I didn't want to be like, or what I didn't want to have experience in my life, or I didn't want others to experience having gone through that myself. I wanted it to be better for the future. Like those pain points in my life are what have created a purpose in my life. And I think when you, to your point, when you have a purpose or a why, you are then pulled out of bed versus trying to force and push yourself out of bed.
Yeah.
Like again, the Olympics pulled me out of bed because I had something to strive for. When I got home and I had nothing, I was forcing myself to get out of bed. I didn't have a why. So I was like, why am I training? Why do I want to write a book when I don't feel like I want to be on stage right now? Why do I care about doing more events? I was doing it because I thought I should, and I was trying to force myself to. But when I found, at that time, rock bottom created a new purpose to rebuild my life. And sledge hockey, experiencing the challenges of our team struggling with not having enough depth of talent, because we need more players involved in the sport. because it's lacking awareness is what the pain I felt, because I want my team and Team Canada to be strong enough that we can compete with you guys because you won the last 3 fucking medals.
Yeah.
But it's like, for Canada continually to be a strong competitor, we need more players involved in the sport. And so my pain I felt of going to tryout camps and not having the depth of talent that I want is what helped me create this sledge hockey experience. So the pain created the purpose. And so today when I wake up to build a business, we're going through the challenges right now that are mentally, they feel defeating every day. And I have to keep practicing both positive daily habits, but it's the pull that gets me out of bed every day to continue to face it, and doesn't feel like a challenge that I can't overcome because I have that why.
Totally. So the message to the listeners is you've got to find your purpose, your calling, whatever it is. And it's hard for some people because it feels so loose for them. And I think your advice around do something, try something, experiment, and then you'll determine whether this is positive for you or negative for you. And you can choose not to do it again, or you can do it more and develop yourself more. So I think that's really good. You talk about pain created your purpose. That the thought that went through my head was Viktor Frankl, who was, the psychiatrist and the doctor that was in the Auschwitz concentration camps years ago. When he came out after that, he wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, which is a powerful book. Yes,
dude.
okay.
I 3 hours ago this morning just heard about that book for the first time. It's so weird you're bringing that up.
Kevin, or can I call you Remp or Remps?
Yeah, Remps.
What is it?
Remps. Just
Remps. All right, awesome. That's your friends. What your friends call you, right? All right. Anyway,
absolutely.
No, isn't that awesome how we connect on that? It's funny how law of transference, right? Different things, but I'm going to tell you, read that book. The concept is, and anyone listening, Man's Search for Meaning, it has sold 25 million or more copies over the years. He came out of the concentration camps and he noticed a pattern. Some people in those difficult situations would find a reason to walk onto the side grounds and toward the outer fences, knowing that they would be shot in those concentration camps. They were done. They were just done. But he said those that found meaning in their suffering were able to go on after that. Those that survived, of course, go on after that and build successful lives. And I think that's what, I think of your dad. I think of your situation. I think of the divorce of your parents. That was probably shocking to you too at the time. I mean, with your dad, did you see patterns of this negativity when you were a younger kid? Were there,
No. My dad was super old school. Like, he wasn't one to say, I love you hardly ever.
Right.
But he was a great dad. He provided for the family. He was caring, took me to sports and stuff. And it wasn't until his injury that he was faced with so many challenges like that.
So you almost give someone a little bit of a break when they go through such a traumatic situation, because we can never walk in someone else's moccasins, right?
Well, another takeaway from my dad is that, a lot of his depression came from, he would say things like, I've been waiting to live my life. He was just 2 or 3 years from retirement. And so he felt like he was robbed. And so that was one of the reasons why I choose to take the risks that I do today and chase life, because I don't want to live the life like my dad, where, he's 52 years old. And then he's like, oh shit. He's like, I've been saving all this money to then enjoy working on the garden or taking a moose hunting trip, or to buy that vehicle because I'm running a clapper for the last 20 years.
Isn't that sad? Isn't that sad to say that I want to retire so I can live my life?
Yeah.
Imagine how many people live like that, though.
Totally. I feel like saying it's the old school mentality, because my generation is definitely not pursuing that way so much. But yeah, I think that there's enough. That was one of the biggest shockers, is just that, when I was 20 years old and I want to start a business, I'm like, it's going to put me $20,000 in debt, and I'm already living paycheck to paycheck, but I'd rather take this risk now and fail than to go through my life, through my 20s and into my 30s, and say that I wish I would have, I could have, I should have.
That's cool. Awesome. Resilience, I wrote down here. Vision, your story is full of vision. You said somewhere, when people can't see the end, we've talked a little bit about that. You said, maybe I read something about your book. It was on your book video. You got to be adaptive. People have to be flexible, right? So they don't get stuck in that helplessness place. Anyway.
Just continually, it's not easy to go with the flow per se, but to trust that the journey that you are on today is leading you somewhere larger than you can currently even see for yourself. It's these challenges that are put up in front of you are put there for a reason. For one, in the words of Randy Pausch, you familiar with Randy?
Yep.
And he says the walls that are put up in front of you are put there for a reason. And that reason is to keep those people who do not want something bad enough out.
Totally.
And the second thing I think is that these challenges are here to help craft and sculpt and shape you to become stronger and tougher to take on those bigger challenges in the future. And you don't know what those bigger challenges are and also where those challenges will lead you. But if you have faith in believing that the journey you are on today and the challenges you are currently facing are preparing you for something greater than you can even possibly imagine right now, that the pain will be worth the suffering, just like you said.
That's right. I call it master interpretation. You want to be a master interpreter, right? In terms of look at your experiences, circumstances, and find vision in it to take that higher road, whatever that is. That doesn't mean you're not going to experience pain. And I agree with the
Not at
quote.
all.
I agree with the quote that you just said, right? Right. The average will stop at those barriers, right? I remember when I worked with Tony Robbins years ago, he'd say, most people will quit after 1 or 2 attempts. But when you look at those who succeed, they're trying again and again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
And eventually, because they're willing to adapt, they succeed. And that's probably one of the greatest messages that we can. Mike, here's a question for you. What gave you hope in yourself? Was it that 6 months into, and I'll get the timing wrong, but was it 6 months into laying in that bed, you felt your toes move because you had the doctors tell you you're never going to walk again? Did you just slowly start to feel things in your legs and you go, doctor, let me get up and stand. Let me just try. How did that look?
It started swearing.
Wait, what do you mean you started swearing? What, to the doctor?
And at myself. The process of learning to walk again, I'm at first in the hospital bed, I've got nothing. So I go from the hospital to rehab. And when I get to rehab, I start therapy with my therapist's name is also Chris. Excuse me. And so I go down to therapy one day and I asked Chris and said, what do I got to do here? Like, you've seen the best and the worst of some people recover and some people don't. And it's like, what do you got? Like, how am I ever going to learn how to walk again? And he says to me, you just have to try. And I'm like, but in my head, I was like, fuck you, man. I'm like, I was so pissed at that answer. I was so pissed. I was so angry. I went back and I said, I don't want to work with this guy. I complained. I asked for a new therapist. But they're like, no, trust me, he's the best. You got to stick with it. So I said, okay, elaborate. And he's like, every night and every morning, just stare at your toe. Just for 10 minutes, just stare at your toe and just keep sending the brain impulse down from your head to just try and get something to move. And so every night, I said, what do I got to lose? I got nothing else. What other options do I have? And so I was laying in my hospital bed, and it was 6 weeks. It wasn't 6 months, but it was 6 weeks that I'm laying in bed and I'm like looking at my feet, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, move, like moving. And in my head, I'm saying like 1,000 fucking times here. I'm like, move, fucker, come on, move, like do something. And nothing's happening until finally I got like a flicker, and I got like a flicker. And I wasn't even sure if that was me. The next day I go in the shower and I run hot water. That was at nighttime. So the next day I go run in the shower. I'm sitting in the commode chair and I'm running hot water on my feet. And I figure, hey, if I run the hot water, that I can loosen up the muscles a little bit better to have a bit more control. And so I'm running the hot water on my feet. My toes are curled over the edge of the kick plate in the wheelchair. And I'm on command in my head. I'm like, move, move, move. And I'm doing it. I'm like, nurses, come here. You got to see this. I'm like, I'm naked. It doesn't matter. And they're running over. I'm like, you can check it out. Like, look, it's moving. I'm moving. I'm like, no, the toe.
That's good. Oh boy.
But here's the thought is that in my head, I realized, like Les Brown would say, is that it's possible. And I said to myself, if I can get one, I bet you I can get another. And it was like a week later that I got my next toe to move. And then I got 3 toes. And then I got like another 3 toes. And it was just a matter of taking some small baby steps. And so when we have that huge vision in our lives of something that we want to achieve, we can get overwhelmed at the thought of, where do I start? How is this ever going to be possible? And like my therapist, Chris, said, and we all need to think about is that we need to begin. We just need to try and have faith and believe that it's possible before you see the results, and continually take action. And as soon as all you need is that first step, that first sign, and you will know again then what is the next step.
That's really good. You know, you made me think when you first started talking about Chris, your therapist, and he said, try. I thought of Yoda. Now, here's what I mean by that. Yoda from Star Wars.
Yeah.
I put a video up on my Instagram, I don't know, probably 8 months ago or something, that just said, Yoda was wrong. There is a good reason to try. Trying is okay. And for most people, the couple hundred likes or whatever were like, absolutely, my video made sense to them. But there was one person in the comment section that's like, that is totally wrong. It's all about do. It's all about do. And I think people sometimes miss the point. You'll never do until you try, because you don't have the experience yet. Like I tell people, when people say, I can't, I say that's the ugliest 4-letter word. Eliminate the word can't from your vocabulary. I said, if you're going to use the word can't, you say, I can't yet. Right? I mean, you have to give your mind and your hope, your heart, an opening constantly so that you don't become helpless. And I think Chris was awesome. And I think your inner drive and resilience to say, I'm going to prove something, and to say, you almost have a chip on your shoulder in a positive way, that you took his advice and little by little, boom, you made it a reality.
Keith Cunningham quote, this was written on my wall for years. I started a quote board after I got injured. I would just, through reading books, podcasts, YouTube videos, I'd start writing stuff with a Sharpie on a piece of Bristol board on my wall.
For sure.
Well, one of the ones that was early on written there was by Keith Cunningham, which said, ordinary actions consistently done create extraordinary results. And from all the stuff that I've done, from learning to walk, making Team Canada, writing a book, starting a business, getting out of depression, it was all a series of just ordinary actions consistently done, which help create extraordinary results.
I love that. That's so true. Stay on the path and keep taking those actions towards your end result, your goal, your purpose, your passion, your vision, and you'll succeed. Most people just give up a little too early. They don't see the results fast enough. But the law of the harvest says, I won't get into the full law here, but the third principle in the law of the harvest says delayed gratification. That you can't cram, if you're a farmer, you can't cram the harvest. You can't say, well, I delayed all season, but I got to have corn ready by Monday, so I'll start planting on Friday. It doesn't work like that. There's delayed gratification. And it took you, how long did it take you to get up on your feet from the time you first felt?
Like, it was 6 weeks to wiggle the toe. It was like 4 months starting to use a walker, 10 months in a chair, 2 more months on canes. So I was walking and riding again in a year, but it was 3 to 4 years to walk every day regularly without pain. And now it's been 12 years.
Wow. And then
now I get around consistently, but it's more about maintaining what I have than it is about gaining in my ability to walk.
Got it. Are you standing up right now? Or are you sitting?
Yeah, I'm standing up.
How you feel? Normal? Is it?
No, like my legs are tingling. I got some nerve stuff. My legs are numb and tingly a little bit right now. Like this is funny talking about pain and purpose and all that stuff again.
Yeah.
Like one of my, I like talking about it. I don't talk about it often though, but like one of my biggest drives to being an entrepreneur and succeeding at this is so that I have the flexibility to stay comfortably working at home versus in another office environment. And people, employers will make accommodations, but to be able to I have a standing desk that I can raise and lower as needed. I have a very ergonomic chair. I can work in my shorts frequently. I've got the couch to go lay down on or take a nap in my bed if my back's killing me. Like,
right.
That's a significant driving force for me to be able to like succeed as an entrepreneur.
Wow. You have done an amazing thing to design the life the way you want to live it. And I put my hat goes off to you. I just think your story is an inspiration. So tell everybody about your book. What can they expect from the book?
Sure. So for those who might be interested, Still Standing is my autobiography, and the subtitle here is When You Have Every Reason to Give Up, Keep Going. And what resonated so much when I thought back about my life is, like I said, there were so many moments where I felt like giving up. Like I said, from the business failing to dad passing away to, I didn't even talk about getting cut from the hockey team to,
You did get cut from the hockey team?
Yeah, I played one more year after the Paralympics, and I played more for the reasons why I played were not the right reasons, meaning I played because people said that I should, I can, why not? And I was too scared to leave because it was an easy setup. And I knew what to do to continue being an athlete, but I was too scared of the real world. And that's one of the things that so many athletes face when they leave that is like, who are you now?
Correct.
Identity loss and getting into the job world. So on that subject for a second here is when I was let go, the lesson that I learned is that you're better to make the decisions for yourself before someone makes it for you. Because had I had the guts to leave a year earlier after Sochi when I wanted to, but I was too scared to, I would have had another year that I could have invested in my business and doing anything else I wanted to do with my life. But because I was playing chicken with my life, I hung around because that was the easy thing to do.
Right. Which is a common thing. I think you're speaking to a common phenomenon right there. So your book is Still Standing, When You Have Every Reason to Give Up, Keep Going.
Yeah, and it's a raw read. How I speak is every word on these pages I wrote myself, and I wrote it as if I was sitting here talking to you and we were shooting the shit, having beers in a locker room or something. It's the nitty gritty, but I found that when I speak with people at hockey rinks, in parking lots, drunk at a party to in a top of a tower here in the city of Toronto doing a speaking engagement, people connect the most with the real deal. And so that's what I wanted to put in the book.
Awesome. Okay. And they can go to Amazon to get that, right?
That's the best place.
Or they can go to your website too. What's your website? We just put that up there too.
Sure. KevinRempel.com is where you can also pick up the book, learn more about me, and I, of course, do some public speaking. And if we haven't touched on it, we don't need to get into it too much, but if anyone's interested in like the corporate team building I do with Sledge Hockey, playsledgehockey.com is where you can learn more about that.
Awesome. It was great to have you on the show. Hang on for just a second, but I just want to thank you for being on the show. You are a story of resilience, and I can't wait to share this podcast. So thank you, brother.
You got it. Thanks, DJ.
All right.
Podcast listeners, thanks for listening. You've taken time out of your schedule, and I really appreciate it. Now, do me a favor. If you like what you heard, star it. Thanks. Now go unleash your greatness within.
GreatnessWithin.com